This is chapter Trenches. All right. So we're going to start. This is the Western Front. There were two fronts. There was the West and the East, essentially. And what we're looking at is essentially the West and the East of Germany. That's how they're named. So West of Germany, East of Germany. So the big one, probably the worst one, was the Western Front, which is between France and Germany. So it goes along here, and there's going to be, hang on, so front line on September 5th. So it's a little further right there. No, wait, it goes, okay. It goes all the way down here, all funky. And then I guess it gets pushed back to here. Interesting. All right. And we've got Belgium, Germany, you've got Luxembourg in there, which is just extra little country. Of course, France. All right. First question says, why were traditional methods of fighting no longer possible during World War I? After the First Battle of Marne, the war on the Western Front changed. Machine guns and other new weapons had made traditional methods of attack obsolete. If troops attacked the enemy by charging with bayonets, as they had in previous wars, they were mowed down by machine gun fire. And I talked about what the machine guns looked like at the time. They're not what they are now, for sure. So you'd have this basically tripod situation going on here. You'd have one person who's firing over here. You have the other guy who's feeding the bullets. And then you've probably got some guys who are maybe looking out ahead, saying, all right, here, over here, they're to the right, to the left, and paying attention to make sure this thing doesn't overheat, because they were prone to overheating at that point. So, this one. So, new weapons made traditional methods of attack obsolete. Which of the following was not a condition of trench warfare? Comfortable beds, drowning, disease, lice, flies and rats. One of those things does not belong. All right. Fighting quickly turned to trench warfare. Both sides dug trenches in a zigzag fashion on the Western Front, from the Belgian coast to Switzerland. Most trenches were about 10 feet deep and were fortified with sandbags and wood. Some were even fortified with corrugated iron to keep them from caving in. To make it as difficult as possible for the enemy to reach a trench, a barbed wire barrier was erected in front of it. Tin cans and razor blades were often attached to the wire to enhance its effectiveness. So, basically, they wanted these people to, like, run into this barbed wire or the tin cans to let them know, like, where they are, and kind of send the alarm of, like, hey, there's a person over here. This is kind of showing how that these were not just, it was a little more intricate. This one is very clean looking. These are not going to be straight lines. All right, so this is no man's land, the very beginning, where this is going to be that middle point, which doesn't belong to anybody. So that's why it's no man's land, because it doesn't belong to anybody. So you've got your front trench, And then you've got a little thing that goes back to a support trench. And this is probably more I almost feel like this is more World War II, because you're not going to have this actual concrete house. That's not going to exist. You might have some areas that are deeper, and you might have more. So you might have more than, one, basically. And then you might have some cannons in the back and stuff like that. All right, so here we can see this guy is kind of ready to monitor whatever's happening up there. We got this guy sleeping, this guy sleeping, this guy sleeping, this guy sleeping. Very comfortable looking. Yeah, totally. You can see how it's supported with like sticks and branches, and here's like a almost like a bridge thing. And then we've got some wood here too, just to kind of, it's supposed to keep stuff up so that the dirt doesn't collapse in, essentially. There were generally 4 main lines of trenches. The trench line closest to the enemy was the firing trench. Soldiers served in the firing trench for up to a week. There they fired at enemy troops and took shelter from enemy fire. The line behind the firing line was the cover trench, where reserve troops supported the front line. The trench line was the reserve trench, which contained supplies. Communications trenches connected the 4 trench lines with one another and allowed soldiers and supplies to move between them. Soldiers typically rotated on duty between the 4 main trench lines. So this keeps people like further back, essentially, and they're basically taking turns. And here we've got kind of a complete example of what was going on. So you've got some fighter planes up here that started. This is like the time of like the first Air Force, essentially, right? So we've got British Sopwith Camel biplane. We've got a German Fokker plane with synchronized machine gun. That was starting to happen. So they had to synchronize the bullets to work with the propeller. Otherwise it's going to shoot into the propeller, and yeah, that's not effective. And then I guess they included the Red Baron and his triplane. So triplanes have like 3 wings, essentially. Biplanes have 2, right? And then you've got all the other good stuff. We've got different rifles. We've got everything's labeled in this thing. So machine gun, gas mask, you've got messenger dogs. That was important. So you had dogs and horses big time in here. A lot of times they had gas masks for them too. So yeah, all kinds of stuff. All right. Life in the trenches was extremely grim. Heavy rains caused the trenches to fill up with water and mud. Many soldiers who were asleep or wounded sank into the mud and drowned. Diseases such as trench foot, shown in the picture below, flies, lice, and rats were rampant. In the first 5 months of war, both sides lost nearly 1 million men. All right. Here we go. All right. So first, notice how they had to stand this gross water. Then try to remember that if you were taking a long bath or a long shower, how are your feet get all like pruny? Yes. And if you stayed in there and the water was gross and dirty, now you're dealing with this loveliness. Beautiful. So blisters, germs, dying skin. You see all kinds of blisters. Everything's swollen. And here we have, yeah. This one, it doesn't have any toes anymore. It's very lovely. All right, so if you haven't noticed, it's comfortable beds. There were no comfortable beds there. All right. What was the land called between the trenches? I've already said this, but the area between the trenches was called no man's land. On command, soldiers would go over the top, climb out of the trenches, and charge toward the enemy. When they did this, they were slaughtered in record numbers by machine gun fire and artillery. All right, so no man's land right there. And that's it for trenches.